want to talk to you about legal podcasts for lawyers to grow your practice. So if you are right now struggling to grow your practice and you want to really educate yourself, you want to get inspiration, you want to get guidance, here's a review I want you to pay attention to. I want to first talk to you about the best legal podcast to help your small firm. So you have the Law Entrepreneur. So if you have recently started your own law practice or are an experienced boutique small firm partner, the Law Entrepreneur is pretty interesting. So basically, this legal services industry podcast addresses the business aspects of operating a law firm, something that new lawyers may actually find interesting, and new lawyers may neglect that aspect of things. So the host Neil Tyra often interviews industry experts in running a law firm as a business and practicing lawyers. So the advice being shared is based on personal experience and approaches that work in practice, as well as expert opinions and insight. You also have the Lawyerist, and the Lawyerist actually is a fan favorite for both practicing lawyers and law enthusiasts. Yes, the legal profession has fans. It's been recognized as one of the best legal podcasts on several streaming platforms, including Spotify. So it's really available anywhere you like to listen. The rotating guest roster includes thought leaders, practicing lawyers, and experts in the legal field addressing current hot topics, legal ethics, and news. And the host is actually is a team, is the Lawyerist team. And you also have a handle on the law. This is the third podcast I want to share with you. And so, of course, the host is Bill Handel, pretty reputable podcast. And the frequency is every week, and the episode length is 30 minutes. And so this adaptation of Bill Handel's long-running show is a light-hearted weekly law firm podcast airing every Sunday. And Handel answers questions submitted by small firm lawyers or addresses frequently asked questions by clients with witty, experience-based responses. And what we love about this podcast is that you have the interactiveness of the podcast is really pretty good. So I first explained to you the best legal podcast to help your small firm. And now I want to talk to you about the best legal podcast for law firm growth. So whether you are just starting your legal career or you are in a legal career in a large firm, you want expert insight or how to advance and navigate big firm politics and challenges, or you have worked for decades in a large law firms, this law podcast addresses issues important to big firm lawyers and staff members. So you have the Maximum Lawyer podcast. And so this is the best legal, in our view, twice weekly podcast from which even practicing attorneys who have been arguing cases for many years can learn new things. Initially hosted by Tyson Mutrux and Jim Hacking, Maximum Lawyer podcast has now grown into a collaboration between attorneys nationwide, or even worldwide, by the way, a forum for practicing lawyers from different countries to share ideas and resources, address common challenges, and find solutions to legal questions and gray areas of the law. Topics vary each week and cover anything concerning the operations of a successful growing practice. The sheer variety of topics and the insight from attorneys practicing in different legal systems make each episode unique. You also have Legally Speaking. And so Legally Speaking actually it's hosted by Robert Hanna. And the episode length goes from 30 to 45 minutes every week. So from tenured lawyers to newly minted lawyers and law students just starting their career in a big firm, anyone practicing law can learn something new from the Legally Speaking podcast. And the hosted interview format covers legal tech, mental health and balance for lawyers, cannabis and drug legalization, and more. It offers perspectives from respected legal professionals around the world. You also have Matters Season 2. So Matters Season 2 is a client-focused legal podcast addressing a key but often neglected part of running a successful legal practice, and that is client service. Very important. Client service, that's where the revenue actually is at. Lawyers may not have realized that the technological shift in recent years has also shifted client expectations. They can learn a lot about that impact from this law podcast. And Matters Season 2 goes back to the basics of client service and evaluates different and alternative legal services provider, tools, and technology and their respective benefits to help law firms shift perspective from lawyer-centered to client-centered. And that's going to help you actually make more money over time. I want to talk to you about the best legal podcast covering news and current events. The legal world is ever evolving, and recent technology advances have actually prompted significant rulings to keep up with social media and internet crimes, right? Keeping up with these landmark rulings and current legal debates is kind of critical for practicing lawyers, legal professionals, law firms, and laypersons. So if you are looking for the best legal podcast covering the latest legal news from the country's courtrooms, law schools, and legal newspapers, you want to really sort of follow the list that I'm giving you. So you have a Law 360's Pro Se. And so every week, the Pro Se hosts recap recent legal news, a Cliff's Notes version of developments in current cases or decisions made by superior or Supreme Courts. And this weekly legal industry podcast mixes hot legal topics and cases that didn't make actually the news cycle. And the show features, and that's one that we love a lot, because the show features expert guests who help break down the legal jargon and present each case in a clear, approachable format. Both hosts have a legal journalism background and can present each case briefly. So, by the way, the host you can have Amber McKinney, Bill Donahue, or Alex Lawson. Actually, there are three, but they usually change the rotation. And you also have Lawyer to Lawyer. So, Lawyer to Lawyer is closing on 20 years of broadcasting and is one of the longest running legal news shows. It is actually a trusted source for current events and discussions of recent legal rulings, hosted by an experienced criminal defense attorney, J. Craig Williams. And so J. Craig Williams and his industry expert guests present insights into the hottest topics on the U.S. legal front, exploring legal news and cases from the local to the national level. So that's really good. You also have Bloomberg Law. So Bloomberg Law, actually, the host, June Grasso, she received actually an Emmy Award, and with one listen to their podcast, it's clear to see why. And so this legal podcast has no set schedule, but typically addresses many topics and releases several 30-minute episodes every month, covering legal issues in the news and high-profile cases. And the format includes well-rounded insights from Grasso and both practicing attorneys and legal scholars. You also have a Legal Angle podcast. So here, host Emmanuel Olawale received several legal accolades and academic awards, including National Black Lawyers Top 100, Super Lawyers Rising Star, and National Trial Lawyers Top 100. And he's the owner of Olawale actually law firm. And Olawale's Attorney podcast has a broad range of topics with insights into various topics from social and legal issues to culture, art, and music. So the variety of topics actually makes each episode fresh and interesting, and we love it a lot. Let's talk about the top legal podcast for advancing your professional growth. And so I want to first start with Grow Law Firm Podcast. So basically, the Grow Law Firm Podcast is a weekly series that brings together sales trainers, business growth consultants, marketing specialists, practice management software experts, and successful lawyers who have built sizable law firms. This podcast provides attorneys with valuable insights and strategies to enhance their firms and stay ahead of the curve in the ever-evolving legal landscape. So a unique aspect of this podcast series is actually that it focuses on professional growth. So every episode aims to provide practical strategies to enhance a lawyer's performance and productivity, whether it's tips on harnessing technology effectively in a legal setting, advice on building a winning team, or guidance on establishing a robust personal brand. The Grow Law Firm podcast equips lawyers with valuable tools to excel in their careers. You also have Unbillable Hour. So the host here is Christopher T. Anderson, and the episode is actually 1 hour long every 2 weeks. So hosted by an experienced law firm management professional and practicing attorney, Unbillable Hour podcast present advice about the practical side of managing a law practice. Anderson actually covers hiring and retaining top talent, finding your niche in the legal industry as a new practitioner, and using AI effectively. It is basically an ideal attorney podcast for CLOs, managing partners, or those who wish to become so. You also have the New Solo. So New Solo, really fantastic podcast. And the host, Adriana Linares, very, very competent. And so this is actually a monthly podcast that actually lasts about 1 hour. So that's once a month, 1 hour. So solo practitioners or those considering striking out independently can learn more about legal entrepreneurship and growing a thriving solo practice a solo practice form, especially if they actually listen to New Solo podcast. Every monthly episode of the Law Firm podcast features a guest addressing law practice management, networking, helpful legal technology, and other points of interest for the single attorney firm. And legal consultant Adriana Linares offers insight into how solo lawyers can identify growth areas and which technology and a legal toolkit can streamline their practice. You also have Ladies Who Law School, wonderful podcast, and so hosted by two recent law school graduates. So we're talking about Haley and Samantha. Samantha Lemke and Haley Davis. Ladies Who Law School is a witty, entertaining legal podcast about the law school experience. Our current or prospective law students can learn much about what to expect over the 3 years in law school, and the hosts tackle important issues with heart and humor. Fantastic. You got to really listen to this. You also have the Law School Toolbox. And so every week, two experts on law school and the bar exam, Lee Burgess and Allison Monahan, share practical tips to help law students navigate their academic progress, career search, professional development, and other topics to help law school students and recent grads position themselves for success in the legal world. And the weekly episodes combine humor with expert advice. And this law podcast is valuable to an aspiring lawyer's legal toolkit. Fantastic. You also have Law Next. So host Bob Ambrogi interviews entrepreneurs and innovators responsible for creating the next big thing in the legal industry every week on the Law Next podcast. It's about 1 hour every week. And Bob actually examines current legal trends and topics like new law firm business model. That's really cool. Enhancing access to justice and legal tech startups. And law school graduates considering a law career other than active practice may actually gain insight into other professional legal careers and build their law school toolbox with the knowledge gained from the podcast. So that's really fantastic. Let's talk about the best legal podcast on legal stories. So for true crime enthusiasts, I want to share with you the best legal stories podcast, reviewing the riveting, headlining, grabbing cases in depth and detail. You don't have to be a lawyer to love this enthralling tales. So for instance, you have Court Junkie. And so this weekly legal podcast is perfect for anyone who enjoys digging into the meat of true crime and the criminal justice system. And it's hosted by Jillian Jalali. The episode highlights issues within the U.S. justice system and addresses injustices by interviewing key participants in important cases and reviewing court documents. She also attends trials and offers first-hand professional insights into the criminal trial process. Fantastic. Jillian is just great. So the episode length is about 1 hour and it's run every week. You also have Heels of Justice. So basically, this woman-focused podcast is hosted by the head of IP Transactions Worldwide at Apple, Sarita Venkat, and Vice President of Legal and Deputy General Counsel at Coinbase, Catherine Minarik. Okay, though the show stopped producing new episodes like a couple of years ago, the interviews with trailblazing female attorneys are still valuable and worth a listen, in our view. Guests have made waves in the courtrooms, politics, and boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. You also have Legal Wars. So the host here is Hill Harper. And so the episode is about 30-minute length. And so you want to go behind the headlines of the most famous court cases in the U.S. with actor and author Hill Harper, a Harvard Law School graduate. And the podcast episodes are not released on a set schedule, but always consist of a well-researched and entertaining presentation of complex legal matters. Each one includes Harper reviewing the court transcripts of cases in real time, going beyond what was reported in the news. And listeners can get a front row seat with access to all the testimony and evidence presented to the jurors. You also have Lawyer Stories. So basically here, if you follow the Lawyer Stories podcast Instagram account, you will enjoy the upbeat, motivational podcast featuring different legal guests discussing their professional lawyer stories and personal journeys. By the way, the host here is Benny Gold, and this podcast is coming out every week, and it lasts about 1 hour. Host Benny Gold interviews different legal professionals every week, demonstrating what success in the law field looks like. Guests are really practicing attorneys, solo law firms, legal tech developers, professors, and entrepreneurs. So you can see a very varied client base or varied interviewee base. Let's talk about the best legal podcasts to keep you up to date on technology. So whether you want to get into the legal technology and innovation field or learn more about how legal tech can work for you and your firm, you'll find a lot of interesting information with this following best legal podcasts for tech and innovation. So you have Cyber Law, for instance. So the host actually is Steptoe and Johnson LLP, and Steptoe and Johnson LLP partner Stuart Baker host this interview-style weekly podcast featuring technology law, legal technology startups, and cybersecurity. The series actually discusses the latest trends and events in government, privacy, technology, and security. You also have Technical Legal, and the host Chad Main from Technical Legal interviews law and tech innovators, presenting an episode every 2 weeks. And so listeners can learn more about how to implement legal innovation in their own practice and how other leading firms are using advances in legal tech. A perfect choice in our view for forward-thinking lawyers. You also have the Business Growth Advantage. So basically, it's important to understand that host and practicing attorney Joey C. Vitale is really a riveting interviewer. And he's the host of the Business Growth Advanced podcast. He helps entrepreneurs and firm managers understand more about the business side of legal practice. So that's really fantastic. And so his weekly episodes feature insights from legal experts, his own experience as a lawyer and business coach, and strategies that business owners can implement while staying legally protected. So that's really cool. And we love the versatility, the variety, the depth and breadth of topics that are actually discussed on this show. That's really fantastic. Let me talk to you about the tactics here. Let's think about crafting your legal podcast in a few simple steps. If you want to take your legal career to new heights, learning from experienced professionals like Robert Ingalls is invaluable, and especially when it comes to how you go about methodically actually creating your podcast routine. And so that's really important. So basically, you first need to actually, when we talk about legal podcast, let's talk about the pre-production, especially in terms of, I want to talk to you about the pre-production, but also the post-production later on. So when we talk about the pre-production, you need to establish your goals. You need to choose your format. You need to determine your audience. Okay. And then during production, you need to create a lawyer podcast, and you got to have a method. You got to go about it methodically. So choose your niche and topic, prepare a script, find a perfect place to record. We're talking about a quiet place. Feel comfortable with your voice and body. This is really important. It's really quantitative, but also qualitative. This is a qualitative process. Spend money on proper recording equipment, so microphones, headphones, You have camera if this is a video and more. And promote your podcast. And try to get interesting guests. So having insightful guests is important to engage podcast listeners and enhance your credibility as a host. However, contacting high-profile figures can be challenging without an existing rapport. So it's important. So you have to leverage your own network by stating we interview exceptional SEOs, not SEOs, exceptional CEOs rather. Here are the few episodes from people that they probably know that have been on the podcast. So this endorsement effect gives confidence that your discussion will also add value to the guest. So instead of a lukewarm agreement to a random request, they now see an opportunity to continue important conversations with an audience through your established platform. You can also actually repurpose your podcast content. That's really powerful. Maximizing the reach of each podcast episode involves leveraging your audio discussions across other mediums. So this is kind of cool. So long story short, you have the goal to actually go big, because people listen to podcasts often more than they listen to traditional radio or watch TV. Many people rely on podcasts to get their news, learn more about professional topics, or explore their hobbies and interests. A good legal podcast establishes the host as a thought leader and broadens their reach. As a practicing attorney, you can grow your legal marketing strategy with a well-produced, intriguing podcast. This is really, really cool. So what's the recap here? In today's conversation, I spoke to you about the best legal podcasts for lawyers. I gave you the review and now the tactics. In terms of review, I actually broke it down, the best legal podcast to help your start, your small firm, the best legal podcast for law firm growth, the best legal podcast covering news and current events, the top legal podcast for advancing your profession, your professional career, and the best legal podcast on legal stories. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.